I just want to do God's will.
The kind of revolution that the world needs is a Christian revolution.
If you want a miracle, you've got to expect it to happen.
You are the recipients of God's grace and God's blessings, and you rejoice in that reality.
Welcome to Life Today Live. My microphone is on. I'm Randy Robinson. Great to have you here. I grew up in Texas. Went to a school at Oral Roberts University in Oklahoma, and I remember driving up there. It was actually my senior year in high school, and I'm driving up through Oklahoma, and I'm passing these signs that say things like Choctaw Nation, you're now entering Creek Nation. And I remember going, I recognize these as like Native American tribes, but like they have their own nation. And then went to school in Oklahoma, and honestly, the only representation we used to see around town of really kind of the Native American culture were smoke shops. And I'm going, that's weird. And now they're relegated to like casinos, and it's like this whole, I realize there's this whole subculture of America, Native American culture, that I didn't know anything about, other than a mention of the Trail of Tears and some really bad Hollywood images. I didn't know much. And then fast forward years later, I'm living in Oklahoma and hired a gentleman at a company I worked at, and he described himself as a missionary to Native Americans. And I thought, well, what is that? What does that even look like? And from a DNA standpoint, the guy was part European, part Native American, and he had a heart to, he was a Christian, he had a heart to reach the Native American tribes. Talking to him, I realized that we have in our own country an entire group of people that are neglected, impoverished, and really overlooked in many ways. And yet you go in there and you're told a lot of times as a Christian, well, don't do that because it was the Christian Europeans that wiped them out, which is a very, very complex issue because the tribes were very tribal, very different. They were at war when the colonists got here, and it's a very complex and nuanced history, frankly. Yet we've still got a group of people in our own country that have just been overlooked. And you would think, okay, especially in like Oklahoma, there would be these outreaches. And I got to tell you, if I look at the church and say, what's the response been? It's startlingly quiet in a lot of ways. Well, there's one man who has decided he's not going to ignore the issue, and he's going to go in and speak to these Native American tribes who still, in many respects, in many places, are very isolated from American culture. And so you're going to meet him today if you don't already know him. But there's a quick trailer because he's put together a documentary that you can see on his website. And I want to give you just a glimpse of what my friend Nick Vujicic is doing. So watch this, and we'll be right back with Nick.
A lot of the issues are passed down generationally. There's been all kinds of atrocities from abuse to neglect to annihilation to assimilation that really just stripped who they were as Native Americans. A lot of the issues today that people deal with lack of opportunity, joblessness, fathers and mothers not being in the household, that period is where we're at now. But the spirit, that warrior spirit to fight, that's still intact. The people, the men and women that God has called to fight once again with a different heart, with not a victim mentality, without dragging the past in. A native who becomes healthy, who becomes that warrior, will change the world.
That is a documentary available. You can go see that right now at nickvministries.org. And now, here's the man behind it. Nick, welcome to Life Today Live. Good to see you.
Thank you, Randy. Thanks for having me back. God bless you, bro. Thank you so much.
So I guess the first obvious question is, what made you decide I'm going to go talk to the Crow and some other nations? It's not something I hear a lot about, sadly.
Yeah, I had the privilege several years ago to meet Tough Harris. Tough Harris is someone that every Native American knows. He's a young uh, believer on fire for Jesus Christ and was a professional NFL player.
Hmm.
And he's a hero to all the young people. And he did that for several years, and he felt the Lord wanting to lay all that down and go back and change his own community. He's half Northern Cheyenne and half Crow, which is up in Montana. And several years ago, I went to the reservation after meeting Tough. He asked me, would I like to come? I said, absolutely. My own father had, if you will, a very strong love and compassion for the Native Americans. And I learned real quick that there's a lot I don't know about. And like you said, it is a nuance in history that's very unique, very sad. With the colonization, 18 million people got slaughtered of Native Americans between the Spanish coming up from the south and everyone else from Europe coming from the east. And I've been in America for 21 years, and I had never met someone who said, yeah, I'm a missionary on the Native Americans. I knew some people who'd been there, but I really sat down and my eyes were open to, wow, what an incredible oxymoron for me to be an evangelist who's been to 84 countries. I'm a US citizen, been here for 21 years, and no one's really told me about the needs here. And I went up there, and it was like going to a very underdeveloped nation.
Yeah.
And the more I learned, the more I wanted to learn. And so we went there. I've been there now a couple times. And we just went up there in 2024 again with the team and camera crew to just encourage people as much as we can with the gospel of Jesus Christ, and let everyone else know that, just like you said, in most people's minds, we don't know that one of the greatest mission fields is right here within the borders of the USA.
So, what were aside from that big revelation? What were some of the other things that you learned that I don't know, maybe most people don't know?
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, look, even in the Aboriginal Indigenous community in Australia, there is this stigma where, well, they get help from the government and then all they do is use that money for different addictions. And addictions are quite high in Native American sovereign nations. There's a systematic economic oppression. There is no infrastructure in trying to get an electrician there. So when your house breaks, you just leave the house. And there are 6, 7 families in one manufactured home that's leaking. And no, when it doesn't, they just keep on moving and migrating. Abuse of addictions, abuse of children, neglect. I was able to talk to some police officers and government officials, and they really felt that the number one thing is hunger.
Hmm.
And I was perplexed. I'm like, well, aren't there food stamps? Yes. But then talking to everyone, it's really unfortunate that they don't have a grocery store up on the reservation. They have to drive down. They have the highest rate of diabetes in the nation. There's no dialysis up on the reservation. They always have to come down. And unfortunately, with the neglect of things, some people just don't go down to go get the food that the kids need. And, a police officer shared with me that, the CPS are called in and all they needed was groceries. He went to go and get groceries. Something very scary as well, Randy, is it's one of the hottest human trafficking Mexican mafia hotspots in Montana because it's a sovereign nation. They don't have more than 3 police officers for the entire reservation. There is no court justice to accuse criminals of criminal sentencing. And so in that nation, if you are a police officer and you pull over someone who you know is trafficking these women and children, Native Americans are seen as one of the most unique and highest paid human trafficking slaves because of how they look. And you can't do anything. And then you have to let them go. And they go off the reservation, they get off the reservation, and still to this day, on a national, federal level, they're trying to even do a simple thing to bridge the law of the USA and the sovereign nation that if they do catch human traffickers on the US soil that were from Native Americans, that justice would be done. It's not done. That's the tip of the iceberg. The social depression, putting each other down, the cultural wondering, what am I going to do in my life? There is no purpose. There's a lot of depression. There's a lot of suicide, a lot of suicide. So it was really heavy to a point where we couldn't just keep that to ourselves. We know that we committed to those reservations, starting with the Crow Nation, actually. They were the first nation, Randy, to change their national constitution as a Jesus Christ is Lord constitution. And they declared God. And so, but it's funny at the same time, the churches don't work together there either. And so how do we come there thinking this is the greatest thing that I learned, Randy, and I want everyone to hear this. The greatest thing I've learned is not only is there need, and that we have an ability to meet that need, but the number one thing was I learned to not assume that you think you know what they need. And it's to come to this point of saying, help us know what you need. And not to just help them, but and they're like, don't just give us bread. Don't just teach us how to fish. Help us to own our own pond. And that's an untapped, incredible breakthrough of wineskin with that thinking. And we have not found a group of people other than Tough Harris and Crow Nation who understands what they have. They don't have the casino on that reservation. And so everyone's very poor. Choctaw, very rich because the casino.
Yeah.
And so there's so many different nuances, awakenings, awareness that I just wanted in this documentary everyone to know of what I witnessed. And we as a ministry have committed whatever we can to reverse engineer how do they have a self-sustaining, first and foremost, spiritual revival, but help them to get back on their feet, if you will, because there was a time where they were okay, and then there was a collapse. And it's been wonderful to talk to some chiefs, city officials, and we went to some schools, and it was beautiful.
So there's obviously outside the purview of missionary work, there are some governmental structures that I'm curious if you have any thoughts on, and again, this is kind of outside the ministry circle, but with the idea of the sovereign nation, which creates some of these legal things where it's leading gaps in criminal prosecution, right? In the name of sovereignty, should we put pressure on lawmakers to change the laws, and does that then encroach on their sovereignty? I don't know. I wonder if we should push in the government way to correct some things, or if that's not helpful.
I don't think it's helpful.
Yeah.
I think it's more on learning where they're at, because they did have, for instance, that particular example, they did have at once a bank up there on this particular reservation, and a court, and it was all disassembled. I think anything that the US mainland government tries to add on as pressure, or you need to do this or you need to do that. It's more of coming there with how can we help them steward best the resources that they have, offer education, opportunity, a bridge from the mainland to the reservation, to even have them have their own education, as little as trade school, carpentry, plumbing, financial literacy, character, mental health programs, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be helpful on that question.
Yeah.
But I really believe, though, there are around 339 recognized sovereign nations.
Hmm.
And I've even asked them, what would you like? And they actually feel like, for instance, the Northern Cheyennes said we still haven't had justice from the US to actually acknowledge something about the Custer War, right?
The one they won.
How is that even possible that something was actually not officially said yet for them? And it's not, that's disturbing, but that emotion, it's like, okay, wait, what? Let's start from the beginning and coming to them and say, what are your priorities? And they basically said, lack of purpose, suicide, and hunger.
Yeah. Right.
And so how do we start there and help them? And, corruption's everywhere. That's for sure. We know that everywhere in the world. It is. There's so much corruption in the US. There's corruption everywhere. But how do you come in a way that doesn't condemn anyone or anything and actually see everything kind of realigned? And I don't know facts of the waterfall effect of help and so forth, but Randy, these sovereign nations have opportunities to do their own international trade. And they're doing what also underdeveloped countries are doing, where they're just basically bought out some of the commodities sometimes of big countries like China. And no one on the ground really then feels the ripple effect of that economic buyout on that thing. And so they know that they're not doing that again. They need to do it internally. And so it's one thing to say, wow, that's a lot of change that needs to happen. But you know what the first hill is? That they actually know how not to change it. And they know they need God, and they know they need help.
Yeah.
And they know that it needs to benefit everyone on every level.
I listened to your message, I believe it was to the Crow, and you said that hope begins with love. And I thought, okay, we can do that. And that's the calling of the church, right? How do we love these people, given, and I fully acknowledge that we are told that it's offensive to preach the gospel because it's sometimes pegged as a white man's religion, or it's associated with the oppression of the past, or even the fact that a lot of the Native American tribes we see had this nature worship, which is not Christianity. How do we, do we just roll in, and if the gospel's offensive, then the gospel's offensive? Or, how do we do this best? How do we give them hope by loving them properly?
It's a great question, Randy. I love that question. You got to show them the love. Just go there and break bread with them. That is the greatest way to show them love. Exchanging gifts, the gifts that they want.
They still do that.
Not what you think they need. And asking them, help me understand. It's like me going out of the countries, right?
Yeah.
What's this culture? What can I say? What can't I say? And we need to build that goodwill up. I think whether that's for our own foster kids on US soil or unreached nations around the world, it's the same thing that applies. Show them that you love me by spending time. Open your ear, not your mouth, and go there several times. There are the majority of the sovereign nations, you're right, it is offensive and not welcome to go and preach the gospel. But so many now missionary friends that I now know who have gone to many Native American soils is to just go and love on and serve. And I think the greatest way would be like, can you imagine, we send missionaries to Africa. Why can't we send Christian dentists to go and give free stuff there,
Uh-huh.
and do different things, and do just love on these people. I think loving on in action, and that's how missionaries do it. That why are you here? Tell me now about your story. And there are even Christian nations and Christian people in Native Americans where some still dabble with some, they call it the medicine man, which is witchcraft.
Mm.
And there are some that don't do that anymore. And so to know how to walk that tightrope, and who's where and what, it takes time to be with them.
Yeah.
And so I think it's time and love in action.
Yeah, and they're not all the same.
No.
The Native Americans in the North Cheyenne are not going to be the same as the Osage in Oklahoma, or
That's
an
right.
Apache tribe or something out in New Mexico or something. So yeah, I think you're right. Going in with our ears open and our mouths shut is probably the best approach, and just saying, how can I make your life better? And we don't have to go far. That's the wild thing about it. Why do you think the church has been slow on this? Do you have any clue?
I still think that there's a stigma
Mm-hmm.
that needs to be broken.
Mm-hmm.
And I think awareness. Um, it's bizarre to me.
Yeah.
It's just bizarre.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's the same kind of, um, kind of thought-provoking, uncomfortable feelings I get with the same thing of, well, what about the other groups of people again, of even loving our own children? And so it's just, I think it goes back to love brings hope.
Mm-hmm.
Love in another way is compassion. And I think our nation has lost compassion for the lost, for the broken, for the poor.
Mm.
Um, and like that goes with all
Yeah.
inner city families.
Yeah.
I mean, we had an incredible meeting in Washington, D.C. with 22 faith leaders, and there was an incredible woman, called Shannon Ward, and we were Sharon Ward was discussing about how do we, in the context of repenting as a country, for instance, for all the abortions that we've done in wanting to see America return back to God, do we really realize that there needs to be compassion filled in our lungs as we do speak to them, those who are continuing to do multiple abortions, understanding though that there are many women out there, not just who get raped, but they all know someone directly who's been shot annually. Why would they want to bring up a baby in a very dangerous, impoverished hell,
Right.
in some places in our country? That doesn't change the fact that sin is sin. But to have that compassion
Yeah.
is to understand them as well. And I think we have a lack of knowledge and understanding, and also a lack of compassion for these people.
All right. I want you to go to Nick's website. It is nickvministries.org. It looks just like this. You can see his documentary he put together on his trip up to the North Cheyenne and Crow nations up in the northern part, northwest of the United States. And I have something for you, Nick. I don't. Maybe you know this, but I'm gonna run down it real quick because there's a very interesting parallel between the Native American tribes all over North America and something that we see in Scripture. And this is not taught like as a part of most history that I've ever experienced. But in 300 years before Christ walked the earth, there were tribes all over Central Europe. They were Gaelic tribes. We think of Gaelic in the context of Ireland and Scotland these days, and western parts of Europe, because the Roman armies went in there, and these very fractured warrior-like tribes were decimated. Absolutely decimated across Central Europe. Alexander the Great pretty much almost wiped them out. That's why they were pushed to the extremes of Western Europe. Well, a few of those tribes actually, the survivors went east as the Romans came up, in Central Europe, and they settled in Turkey. And the Romans called them Galli, which means strangers or barbarians, right? Those people settled in a place, and we know them as Galatians. They were the first Christians that Paul wrote to, one of the early converts to Christianity. So when I see a tribal nation that's fractured, that's has a very sketchy history, in a lot of ways, a warrior-like mentality, I look at the gospel and I go, that hope for the Galatians is the hope for the Native American tribes. So I love what you're doing. How can people help you reach these tribes, or maybe start something themselves?
You know what? Later this year, please sign up to our newsletters at the ministry's newsletters. We will be starting to send smaller missionary groups to go up there and be with Tuff Harris and his team. He has a ministry called One Heart Warrior, and they mentor young men and young women to arise and become the man and woman to be. And there's a lot of love that could be served out there with missionary groups. Check out Arise. You'll also see another nonprofit there, and trying to even bring entrepreneurship there. They started a coffee shop, its first coffee shop up there, and a barber shop. There's a lot of opportunity from an entrepreneurial church and service part. And so please go check out the documentary and ask the Lord, would you have me go to my closest Native American reservation and talk to some close nearby churches? Because some nearby churches do have those connections. Sure. And I just say, go ask the Lord what he would have you do to make a difference there, if that people group is heavy on your heart.
Nick, I appreciate the work that you're doing. I appreciate you bringing the awareness. Again, it's one of those things that it's always baffled me, in so many ways. And I do think that it's just under the radar for a lot of American churches. Not that people don't care. It's we don't know it's there, or we don't know how to approach it. And so you're kind of busting through some of the stigma and breaking down some of those barriers. And I love what you're doing, and I hope people will support you and maybe get involved themselves. Anything you want to add? I love the work. I love it.
I love you, Randy. The video is beautiful. Pray for them, and just pray for us.
Yeah.
Nick V Ministries has quite a year ahead. And we preached the gospel to 67 million people last year on live national television and online platforms in 7 countries. In a Latin American tour, that's part 1 done. This year is part 2. We do Brazil, Mexico, and 5 other countries in Latin America to reach another 200 million people. So we are on track to reach another 1 billion people by 2029. We'll be able to report to everyone who supports us on a monthly basis that so far at Nick V Ministry, 20% of the world had heard the gospel of Jesus Christ fully preached. So pray for us. We have felt that there are doors that remain shut in the U.S. where churches are not working together. Churches are not doing outreaches together. Churches don't know how to evangelize, and most of them still don't know how to disciple well. So pray for our nation, as we do need to still repent and unify like never before. And pray for our country. We really need it.
Yeah. All right. That's Nick Vujicic, a man out there doing the gospel thing, and I love it. And I hope he's encouraged you. If you know someone that would be interested by this, hit that share button. Let them know about it. If you haven't liked, follow, or subscribed, please do that. And again, I'll throw the URL up there one more time. Nick V, because nobody can spell Vujicic. NickVMinistries.org. Check it out. We can make a difference. We can give people hope by giving them the love of Christ. Appreciate you being here. We'll see you again next time here on Life Today Live.